Well, there's an upcoming BnR on, I believe, the 31st of March, and it is rapidly approaching. So, what better time to talk about my thoughts for each format? I guess let's start with Pioneer. I've compiled a few thoughts into a couple Google slides, and I'd like to present them. Let's get on to the first one here. State of the format. Now, to anyone who's played Pioneer in like the past couple months or whatever, you know what is up. It is being utterly dominated by Rakdos cards, by Gruul cards, mostly just like the mice stuff and the Fatal Push and the Thoughtseize and Fable. They are everywhere. So what shall we do about that? Well, let's proceed with step one here. I gotta identify some of the problem cards. Fatal Push Thoughtseize has always been by far the best interaction, bar none. Every deck that can afford to go into black for these amazing cards will. Fable the Mirror Breaker is somewhat similar in that if you can afford to go into red, Fable is almost an automatic 4 of. That is, unless, of course, if you're playing Monstrous Rage and you're of that archetype, in which case you just kill so early it doesn't even matter. Alright, what do we do about these cards, though? I say don't ban any of them. I think there is a better, brighter path that we can take. And that path is revisiting the ban list. Now, Modern just had kind of like a great Halloween of Purgatory where they just let out about 4 cards. In fact, exactly 4 cards. And it has been amazing for the format if you just kind of ignore Breach, which Breach is getting banned. And once Breach gets banned, it'll be back to an amazing, healthy format. Green Sun Zenith, Faithless Looting, Opal Post, Breach Ban, they are all doing great things for the format. How can Pioneer get in on some of that action? First, I'd like to examine some of the alternate mid-range control options so that decks besides Rakdos can do fair things. Uro. Simic mid-range of any kind, any variety, does not exist at all. So Uro does not immediately go into basically any deck that's above 0.1% meta share right now. Now, Uro is extremely powerful. I am well aware of this. I have played a lot of Timeless. I have played some Legacy. I've played with Uro a bit. Yes, the card is great. However, I think with specifically the state of Pioneer right now, Uro opening up those Simic plus mid-range colors so that Rakdos has some competition. Not only would it have competition, Uro is also a great card against Rakdos. So it can serve as a natural check to the deck without, having to ban anything from it. I recognize this is also risky, and I've compiled a bit of cards here. I'm not saying unban all of them, I'm saying unban some of them, and if you choose not to ban Uro, I totally can see that decision, although I am, at least I'm trying to be less risk adverse than I always have been, and I am willing to take the risk of letting Uro enter the format, just to see what would happen. Wilderness Reclamation. People have this weird, not stigma, they have this weird bias against Wilderness Reclamation. Like, oh, it's the devil, you can't unban it. It's going to. What is it going to do without the one extra turn spell, which I am forgetting? I mean, the reason I'm forgetting it is because I did not put it on this list. uh, what is that card? I'm tired. I'll think of the name later. But basically, that was kind of just the combo. None of the counterspell decks, instant speed decks, or whatnot are playing green. They would be basically splashing green for just this. Unlike 5 mana Teferi, you're not drawing a card every turn, so it's basically 5 mana, get more mana, which it's powerful. You can do some memory deluge stuff. However, the kind of archetype it would go into does not exist at all, and I think that type of archetype existing would be good for the format. Inverter of Truth, I put a little asterisk next to it because I think if you ban Thassa's Oracle and unban Inverter, that would be much better for the format. If you were forced to Inverter plus Jace Ruler of Mysteries, that is almost on the slow end compared to what's going on right now. And it would also open up some blue-black control decks, which, again, do not exist. I'm sure you're noticing some patterns here. And if they did exist, well, that means that control would be more than just like 4% of the meta, and that would be great, and that would help keep in check the red aggro decks, because If you're playing control and you've got more than just 4 Fatal Push, you are in a pretty good position against those kind of decks since they're all in on their prowess creatures, since they're running, Monstrous Rage and all these. Never in my life would I think I'd say like broken giant growth effects, but yeah, that's the situation right now. Teferi, Time Reveler, and I know a lot of people have a deep hatred of this card, so allow me to explain the case here. A, if we ban Wilderness Reclamation, Teferi will be a natural check to Wilderness Reclamation. It very well will go into those types of decks, but it will be overall a net negative for that deck's place in the format. It would be a nerf, I should say. Teferi is also particularly good against the card Fable of the Mirror Breaker, which is one of the cards we highlighted is potentially problematic in the current format. It just naturally, returning the Goblin and drawing a card is one of the very few ways to be even on cards, trying to deal with that. And also, right now in the format, we basically have Cavern of Souls, and that's it in terms of checks for instant speed strategies. And I think any healthy format should have some widely played card that counters all counterspell decks, such that the deck building is more engaging and there's these healthy deck building incentives, such that if you're a deck and you play all instant speed spells, either A, run something that can get rid of a Teferi, or B, diversify your interaction suite, which I don't know how anyone can argue that that's a bad incentive to have. So, yeah. I mean, of course, I recognize that the gameplay can sometimes be a pain with Teferi, but I've highlighted some of the benefits of which I believe outweigh that. Card specifically good against Rakdos. Veil of Summer's the card that I'm most confident Wizards is looking at unbanning. Because, well, if we have a Rakdos problem, we've got a card that says anti-black at least. Well, not in the not in that kind of way, in the magic color kind of way. But yeah, so Thoughtseize and Fatal Push are by far the best things in the format. Other colors need same level of instant speed interaction, or not instant speed interaction, cheap interaction. Well, Veil of Summer's just sitting right there. It's like the perfect setup to unban Veil, especially if you unban some of these other cards that can potentially help control decks, such as Wilderness Reclamation. Bro, go ahead. It's legal and modern, doing absolutely nothing, which I guess that's our closest comparison we can really look towards. This is a bit more powerful than modern, but yeah, just unban the dang card already. This is a relic ban from the past. Expressive Iteration. This This card is perfectly fine. It's worse than Treasure Cruise. Phoenix is kind of popular right now. If you have to ban Treasure Cruise to unban Expressive Iteration, I think that can be a good thing, because this can also help some of the slower decks. Accrue card advantage, like maybe a Jeskai control can play Expressive Iteration. It's just such an innocuous card. It does nothing in Modern, just does nothing in Historic. The only reason it's broken in Legacy is because you are operating on very low mana counts, and you also got, Mishra's Bauble and some other stuff that make it so you can more easily make this a 2-mana draw to. Pioneer has none of that, just get the card off. Alright. Now, more controversial takes here, I suppose, but let's first go over the stat. The total representation of combo in the current meta, according to MTG Goldfish, is 1.6%. I'm sure just coincidentally, we also have a mid-range deck that is completely taking over the format in Rakdos. What is a natural predator to mid-range? Well, combo. So if we can up this combo meta percentage, that will have a good effect on keeping the Rakdos meta percentage in check. We also have another problem. This 1.6% Lotus Field. Conceptually, Lotus Field is pretty neat. Gameplay-wise, Lotus Field sucks balls. You basically have to Thoughtseize or Counterspell or whatever, because you can't. All your creature removal is a complete blank against them. All your Artifact, Enchantment, Anti-Storm cards, they run a bunch of Besejus and Ottawaras. That's not going to do much. Very hard to interact with. I mean, the land is hexproof, goodness sake. Not that I'm suggesting that's a poor gameplay decision, because absent this combo deck, I think Hexproof is actually quite healthy on the Lotus Field, but that's a separate conversation. So not only do I want more combo in the format, I want interesting combo. Combo such that if it's powerful, there is obvious, powerful counterplay against it. And that's why I'm suggesting Walking Ballista and Kithis. Let's first go over Walking Ballista. Well, Most of its play won't even be in combo decks, really, I don't think. It'll hopefully make a Scales deck good. It'll be in some Agatha Soul Cauldron decks, which could very well be combo decks, but Agatha Soul Cauldron, kind of by its nature, relying on the graveyard, and also relying on creatures having counters. So if you have creature removal or graveyard, hey, so those are both excellent checks to whatever kind of deck would be doing Cauldron Ballista. Heliod Ballista, if you have to ban Heliod, fine. Heliod's not seeing any play anyways. Walking Ballista is an intricate card. Many gameplay decisions, many interesting deck building decisions. So definitely want that in the format. If you have to get rid of Heliod, fine, but I'm not even convinced Heliod Ballista would even be all that broken. Like, you need more mana than you think, right? It's not just you play 2 mana Walking Ballista, 3 mana Heliod. You also got to pay the 2 mana to give it lifelink, which sounds like, oh, just 2 more mana. 2 more mana is a lot. 2 more mana, you're slowing it down a turn, then it's basically the same speed as everything else going on the format. So yeah, I think it'd be, not only would it be fine power level wise, I think it would make the gameplay a lot more interesting. At least compared to Lotus Field, right? We also got Kethis in hand. This is my favorite deck of all time across all formats. I am 100% biased. I also think that I can make the objective case that it should be unbanned. And I think that case can be quite convincing. So Kethis, any Kethis combo is... There's no way of getting around the fact that it is weak to creature removal, right? Kethis combo needs Kethis out. It's also weak to Graveyard Hate, because any Kethis combo, unless if you're using that first ability, right, you're doing some Aceroc nonsense, it requires you to use your Graveyard Hate. That's good, right? So even game ones, it's like if you have just, your creature removal, you're not totally dead against the combo deck, and you have to bring in a whole bunch of sideboard cards to even stand a chance. That is great. The gameplay with Kethis combo is interesting. It is not Glass Cannon. It is maybe a little slower than some of the Glass Cannon decks, like some of the Gwenna Aceroc, although it can kill somewhat early. So it has the power to be part of the meta such that its positive impact on the meta can be actualized for the format. But let's go back to talking about the gameplay. It plays somewhat mid-rangey. It's got a decent amount of planeswalkers. It's got channel lands, which I know some people have some thoughts about the channel lands. I think they are very healthy for the format. By the nature of Kethis playing a lot of channel lands, it is naturally a more interactive deck. I also think the channel lands, despite the negative impact they have for the ability to play against Lotus Field, they're a net positive for the gameplay against Lotus Field. I think this is even more true for Kethis because you're not reliant on, say, the Leyline of the Voids and whatnot. So I can go much deeper into details about this deck. I can rave about it all day. I think that's my very short 2-second sales pitch, and yeah, let's continue on. So here I have some cards that can be unbanned, but I'm not convinced they'd be healthy for the format. Leyline of Abundance, it's doing nothing in the formats it's legal in. You could probably unban it, but then the high roll mono green devotion deck just gets obnoxious. So I used to be on team unban. Now I'm team banned. Stay banned. Lurrus, people won't agree, but it's almost just an objective fact. That's not the right term, but again, I keep pointing to Historic. Historic is a great format to look at when considering unbans because the format at one point was very close in power level to Pioneer. And at that point, Historic had access to Lurrus, and Lurrus was doing about nothing, maybe seeing play in one deck. It currently goes into none of the decks. I believe that's actually true, right? It goes into 0 of the meta decks right now. So if it creates its own little deck, like say humans that doesn't play Adeline or whatnot, so that's an actual trade. People go like, oh, Lurrus, just all 3 mana cards are banned, so obviously play Lurrus. Would you really play Lurrus if it meant sacrificing Adeline and Brutal Cathar and all these great cards for that? I don't think you would. It's also a natural deterrent against Fable the Mirror Breakers. That's one of the things we want. I don't know why I'm arguing for it to be good in this current meta, or good for the meta. I think it's still not going to be great for the format because the gameplay with Lurrus, it is obnoxious. I do love the card, but again, it's kind of a Leyline of Abundance issue. Same with Gigant. I mean, Giganta I'm almost totally neutral on. I do like the card. I recognize people do not like the card. That evens out to about a neutral, middling feeling. I mean, you can unban it. It just doesn't necessarily benefit the format directly. Field of the Dead, this card is probably unbannable. I mean, the format's so fast right now. Right, like when are you getting to 7 lands? Obviously, you're playing in maybe some like domain deck. Tap colorless land is an actual cost. We don't have fetch lands, good fetch lands, I should say. A lot of the things that make it, or we don't have like Primeval Titan. We don't have consistent ways to tutor it out. If it makes some kind of Elvish Reclaimer lands deck, that's actually a really good thing. But again, the gameplay. I mean, just the inevitability of Field of the Dead. It's yeah, brother, yeah. Okay. Those are my thoughts. The end. Goodbye.